I am very excited today to talk to director Rod Lurie about his new film, The Outpost, something you have to see. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore. I am honored to be joined by director Rod Lurie, whose latest film, The Outpost, is coming to theaters. It's coming out July 3rd. You'll be able to see it everywhere. Rod, I have not seen a movie like this in years. This is a straight up war film by someone who understands the military. So I'm just super excited to talk to you about this. It's about real events in 2009. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff.
October 3rd, 2009 was the date of the battle.
And this was this ill-fated battle in 2009 where the Taliban, was 400 members of the Taliban took on a small number of troops.
Well, you had this American unit that was based at the bottom of the Hindu Kush Mountains, the Nuristan Valley. I mean, at the base of a mountain. And anybody that knows anything about the military will tell you that this was just a disastrous place to put any sort of unit. You never give up the high ground, and it was inevitable that whoever was there was going to be overwhelmed at some point by the Taliban. And in fact, on that day, it was the end result was the bloodiest day of the Afghanistan war for American troops.
Well, it's I mean, people that know Star Wars know if you've got the high ground, you've got the advantage. Right. But this was horrible and tragic, and the way you portrayed it is not like, I'm trying to think of recent war movies that I've seen that are even comparable to the way that you shot this film. I mean, you're right there on the ground. It must have been, I mean, the last half of the film, you get to know everyone at this base. You kind of understand the dynamics and what the potential conflicts are going forward and what they're up against. The second half of the film is brutal. Is just a brutal. You are in the midst of combat. You clearly went about this in a way to put the viewer right front and center. I mean, you don't. The camera's constantly moving, and you are, in a way, you're in it. You're one of the combatants.
Well, I mean, that really was sort of the point, and it should be the point of any combat film, is to try to get you as immersive as possible inside the inside the battle itself. And so one of the things that we did is that we had everything is done in one shot. Every moment of the battle is done without cutaways to explosions, without cutaways to the enemy, without cutaways to even our soldiers or other soldiers. We kept everything as much in the proscenium of the mind and the soul of the soldier that is actually fighting. And so, that is why I think that perhaps you feel that we succeeded in getting this immersive spirit into the film.
Well, it's incredibly effective. And one thing, I don't want to jump ahead too far, and I don't want to give too much away, but you really do this amazing thing at the end of the film where you get to see the people who were actually involved in this conflict.
Right.
You see pictures and video, and in a way, it's kind of like almost like a mini, I want to say like a mini documentary that closes out the film that gives you a little bit more perspective about everyone involved and what they went through.
Well, actually, over the credits, I think it's fair to say that it is a mini documentary.
Yeah.
And that you see a lot of the real people that fought in the battle and obviously who survived the battle. But I'll tell you something else, Chris, is that I had on set with me so many people that actually were in this battle, including the guy who received the Medal of Honor, a guy named Ty Carter, and Ty was on set with us, and he explained to us in excruciating detail everything that he went through and everything that he did. He would tell us what hand he opened the adore with. He would tell us when he stopped breathing as he was running, at what point during a run, and that's Caleb Landry Jones playing him, and his performance is perfection. And I think part of the perfection comes from being so well schooled by Ty Carter himself. We also had a guy who plays himself in the movie, who was actually in the battle. His name is Daniel Rodriguez, and he was sort of the hero of the mortar pit, and he plays himself, which means that he had to replicate the death of his best friend. So in many ways, we were able to have not naturalism, but what I would call actualism in this film, and it's something we're very proud of, actually.
Well, it's clear to me that the cast that you chose had been through some sort of military training. I will say I've never been in the military. I've only been on a film set, which is somewhat similar. Maybe you agree, but but I do come from a military family. My son is actually a U.S. Marine, and he will always point out to me that
you said your son.
My son is a U.S. Marine. He's
old enough to have a son, old enough to. Okay.
Oh, I already sent him, after I watched the film, I sent him a text. I said, just want to let you know this movie's coming out and you have to see it. So,
okay, good.
So, so he always will point out to me these little details where, like, they didn't get that right. They didn't get that right. This would never happen. Or those. Tell me about the attention to detail. I'm not going to be one that could tell, but you clearly had.
We've shown this movie to many members of the military at this point, and thus far, no one's really pointed out anything to me that they feel is unrealistic. We had, as I told you, Ty Carter was on the set, so he was able to guide us. But we had, bona fide military experts on the set. We had a guy named Jericho Denman, who was a Ranger. We had a guy named Ray Mendoza, who was a Navy SEAL. And we put our actors through basic training. And that was not something they were really accustomed to, at least not many of them. Some of them were cast members were actually in the military prior to becoming actors, and I really sought those guys out. But more importantly, putting those guys through basic training gave them some sort of sense of what soldiers go to, at least when they go through basic training. And so I think we're able to soldier these guys up pretty well. Not to mention that regardless of how big the sequence was, if I fucked up, or if one of the soldiers fucked up how to, let's say, hold a rifle or to fire an M4, our military experts would say, stop, gotta do it again. You fucked it up. And so that was, definitely a part of the filmmaking process here.
Well, it's that second half of the movie is just relentless. It's the battle is just truly relentless. I didn't even realize until you pointed it out that it's most action scenes in movies we're used to, like, it's shot A plus B plus C equals X in your brain, but so much of the action plays out in a single shot, a moving shot, just a single. How was the staging of all of that, and how did you pull it off so flawlessly?
Well, sometimes it would take 2 or 3 times before it would appear to be flawless. But, that's a dangerous thing to do, especially when you have a short schedule. Excuse me. Because, one thing goes wrong in a shot. And these shots took place over like hundreds of yards, right? As we are running through them and dealing with that expansive territory. So, you've got... you make sure all your stuntmen get it exactly right. They're behaving like military soldiers. All the explosions have to go off at the right time at the right place. And your actors have to be behaving like proper military soldiers. Not to mention the lead, your lead actors, giving a performance that you want and that you like. And furthermore, the camera has got to get everything right and catch everything that you want. So we rehearsed the hell out of that. We had the benefit of one thing that was actually at first a curse, which was that Scott Eastwood, our lead actor, broke his ankle during the making or before the movie even began. And so it delayed us by a couple of weeks. The insurance company paid for that delay, and I took advantage of that time to rehearse all the action sequences to death. And so that, especially with the cameraman and the stuntman. And, it ended up paying off. You look at like a movie like 1917, right, which also has, a similar idea. But what they did, that's one of my favorite war films of all time. But their genius was not so much the oneers as giving the appearance of being a oneer, right? If you look at that film, you'll see how, like, masterfully the editor and Roger Deakins were able to create what we call stitches, right? Where you think you're watching a, but like a body passes in front of the camera, and then you can stitch a shot together, but you don't really realize that it's not the same shot. And I think there are dozens, if not more, of those shots in 1917. We were, for the most part, we probably had a couple of stitches, but for the most part, we were genuine oneers. We just didn't have, and the other thing is, we didn't have time or the money to shoot this traditionally. Michael Bay sometimes will have like 15 cameras going at once. We don't have that. We had access to 2 cameras, and we only ever really used one. So we just had to sort of be perfect about this, Chris.
Well, I want to ask you, it's funny you mentioned Scott Eastwood. I want to ask if anybody got hurt during the film, because it sure looks like it.
No, nobody got hurt during the film. Scott broke his ankle before the film began. But I have to tell you, you bring up something really interesting, because my biggest tension as a director is, I sure as hell hope no one gets hurt during the making of this shot. I mean, everyone's got to run and gun. I mean, they're really running. They're carrying real weapons. They're running on terrain that is not flat. They can hit a divot at any point. They can fall at any point. They can get hurt at any point. And, we're just so lucky that never happened. And some of these guys are so method oriented, like Caleb Landry Jones, who plays Ty Carter. He'd be running and gunning everywhere, and he didn't want to have any stuntmen ever, and he wanted to get this done as right as possible. And so I was always on edge, and I was certainly on edge that Scott would re-break his ankle, or at least sprain it along the way. So I'm just happy when that never happened.
Yeah, it just it's so funny that you brought up 1917, but I never even thought of that movie when I was watching your film at all.
Well, it's a very different film, and the missions are very, very different, and I think that we're actually in a battle. They're in that film. They're going more from they're overcoming one obstacle after another, and there isn't a genuine battle until the very last minutes of the movie, and that's we see only from the British perspective. And so, we're actually in the throes of a battle. Although I have to tell you that, like I said, I think 1917 joins the ranks of the greatest war films of all time. I would put it up there with Paths of Glory and Platoon and Dunkirk, which Dunkirk influenced me more than any other movie, I think. Only in the sense that when I saw that movie, I realized that you can't do a war film in a traditional way ever again. I mean, it's just too creative. And so the other thing that influenced me then to try to do it this way was, what is the most creative thing that I can think of to do with this film? And it was these, immersive shots.
Well, I did want to ask you, I've never been to Afghanistan, but I felt like I was there. Where did you guys shoot? I mean, the terrain was, I have no idea where you shot.
We shot in Bulgaria.
Oh,
we
wow.
Shot this in Bulgaria, yeah. We scouted Morocco, which probably was a better fit terrain-wise, but the truth is that we ended up shooting in a quarry outside of Sofia, and the quarry obviously has no mountains around it. So the mountains that you see are computer generated. They are CGI, and it's very interesting. What you can do with CGI, especially with the physical geography. We didn't have much in the film, but that was what was needed. Morocco was very difficult for us because it's such a bureaucratic country, and getting in weapons and dealing with the weapons once you're in country was such an unbelievable hassle that we just stuck to Bulgaria, where Millennium, the studio who made this film, is based, and they have all their equipment, and so that was very important to us.
I did want to ask, clearly there's a lot of practical effects, but I wouldn't have guessed that the mountains were VFX. Were there other VFX that you utilized? And if you did, I didn't notice any.
Yeah,
so.
We had a few things that were VFX. I'd rather not say what they were, so I don't spoil it for audiences who watch the film. But let's say that they were few and far between, and that our VFX guys absolutely kicked ass. I mean, they really, really made this film extremely realistic. And what's interesting about VFX in a lot of films is that they're in a world that's not realistic to begin with, so you can get away with so much. In our film, we worked really hard and very extensively to make this as absolutely as realistic as we possibly could, and it was difficult. And we didn't have money for a lot of VFX. We in the same way we didn't have a lot of days to shoot the movie. It was an arduous process, Chris. I have to say.
Well, the hard work pays off. I mean, it's like I say, that the last half of the movie is it's a marathon. It's crazy. I'm really curious. The people that were there for the actual events in October 2009.
Right.
What has their reaction been to seeing this story now portrayed on film?
That's what you worry about the most, right? When you're making this film, is not only how are those guys going to react, but how about the families of the men who died in the battle? How are they going to react? And I will say that we had several members of Bravo Troop 361 Cat were on set while we were making the film, and they were always happy to give us guidance when we needed it. And I really had the support throughout the making of the film from all the families who were very eager for me to include this or that tidbit about their son or their husband or their father. And we showed the movie to everybody that we could in Washington, D.C. at the Brookings Institute in October of 2019. And Jay Tapper, who wrote the book that this is based on, was one of the hosts, and he was nervous as hell. I mean, really unnerved. And I was unnerved because, what if everyone said this movie's shit, or it wasn't real, or, how dare you say this about my son, or portray my son in this way, or my husband in this way. But the reaction was extraordinarily positive, and it was one of the most emotional days of my life when they saw the film. Because the movie, it doesn't portray these guys as a band of angels, because they're not a band of angels. They're soldiers, right? And and they say and do things that they wouldn't say in normal, polite society. And
just a moment.
They're violent guys. Only in the sense of what happens in battle, but they were very appreciative of the film, I must say.
Well, I'm so glad you brought up the Jake Tapper book. I really want to read the book now. Is that what drew you in, or were you aware of the conflict when it first happened?
Well, I was aware of the conflict because anybody that has ever served in the military, and I certainly did, they know that about this battle. It's a part of American military folklore. And Jake's book was a bestseller, so I was aware of that. But I was, I'll tell you something that's not well known. I was approached to make this movie by Sam Raimi. Sam was the original director of the movie, and he met with me when he decided not to direct it. I think he probably went to a couple of other directors before me, and but talked to me about directing it. And I couldn't at the moment of the making of, at the moment that they wanted to make it, because I was obligated to another project. But I did come back to this movie when I became available. They came to me. They initially wanted to make it as a mini-series, and Sam was no longer a producer. But the guy that worked with him, Paul Merriman, was a producer now. And we went to Millennium, who made movies more like Rambo and The Expendables. But they seem to want to branch out into making films that were maybe more artful, I guess is the word to use. And that's how I came aboard.
Well, the results are fantastic. It's opening, correct me if I'm wrong, July 3rd, and it's also part of Fathom Events. Is that right?
Well, no, the Fathom event, which was going to come on July 2nd, went down for the count because of the COVID crisis. Right. It was unfortunately. The three major theater chains all said we're not going to delay our opening, and so we weren't able to pull this off. Mm-hmm. But we will be in several theaters across the country, mostly independent theaters, and we'll be on VOD on July the 3rd. So I would encourage it if you feel safe and if your healthcare experts tell you it's safe to go see it in theaters. But otherwise, spend July 4th with a soldier. You can watch our movie on VOD. We put a hell of a lot into this film, so I hope people get to see it.
Well, the hard work shows, and it couldn't be opening at a better time. I just also need to thank you, Rod, because you were an inspiration for me. Not only did you serve in the military, you served as a film critic in the 90s, and I used to read you, and you were amazing, and you also got me in the Critics' Choice Association, the CCA Critics' Choice Awards through Joy Berlin, and you also inspired me. I remember I've repeated this speech you gave to me many times. This was a long time ago in the early 2000s. I'm going to remind you of this thing that you told me. I was thinking about making a movie, and you're just like, no one who covers, say, sports says, I can do that. Right? No one who covers the media says, well, I guess I could run for, Senate. But people who cover movies, like movie critics, say, I could make a movie. And the point that you told me is you can. And you did. Yes. And that was the speech you gave me. And it inspired me to go, you know what? I'm gonna keep covering movies, but you know what? I'm gonna go off and make films and I
make films. Yeah. And I'd say that is really true. I mean, we all do need a little bit of luck. I won't kid you about that. But you're a really talented guy, and there are quite a few film critics who are very, very creative. You've been with Film Threat for a very long time, right?
Well, I started it when I was in high school. I started Film Threat in high school in the 80s.
Right, and I loved Film Threat.
Oh, thank you.
Fucking loved it. It was always so, provocative and idiosyncratic and iconoclastic, and it was really great. And so, film critics can be as creative as filmmakers, and so you really can break through. And by the way, the Critics' Choice Association, I actually formed that group years ago because because it weren't allowing broadcast film critics into any of the LA Film Critics Association, New York Film Critics Circle, any of those things. And I thought that was fucked up. It was wrong. It didn't make any sense whatsoever. But I had to resign it when I became a filmmaker. And I'll tell you something else, Chris, which is that you and a few other guys are some of the people that sort of threw me out of film criticism. And the reason is that, you look at something like Film Threat and you say, I'm not that good. I'm not as good as these guys at creating. I'm absolutely fucking serious. of doing something. That was a very creative thing that you created. And when you read Pauline Kael or you read Anthony Lane or Manohla Dargis and you watch the beauty of their writing and so on, and I just didn't have that skill. So I consider this a lateral move into filmmaking, and now I'm on this side a little bit. But I'll tell you something: if I was better at my job back then, I probably would have stuck it out. And God knows where I'd be right now. But it was it's really something. So congratulations to all your success.
Well, thank you for all the kind words. I will say it's better that you've gone off in the film realm. I'll just tell you, this thing just pays less and less film criticism.
Yeah,
it's really, and I'm less on the criticism side, more I just love talking to filmmakers like yourself. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. Rod Lurie, congratulations. The Outpost, a fantastic film. You need to experience it on 4th of July weekend. Can't think of a better time to check it out. Rod, thank you so much.
Sure, sir.
Awesome. Take care, man. Let's have you on again soon. I appreciate it.
Thank you.